Good Schools for All is made possible in part by UC San Diego Extension. UC San Diego Extension has partnered with San Diego Public Library System to bring middle and high school students a series of free, in-depth, and hands-on learning courses in topics like robotics, circuits, messy science, 3D modeling, and college planning. The Library Next program started as a pilot project in 6 San Diego libraries in early 2017 and is quickly expanding to more library branches throughout the city. This STEAM-centered program is sponsored by UC San Diego Extension's pre-college programs and the San Diego Public Library. Visit www.sandiego.gov/librarynext for details.
My mom says my neighborhood school isn't good enough.
How am I supposed to know my kids are getting the best education possible?
Welcome to Good Schools for All, a podcast from the investigative news organization Voice of San Diego.
We cut through the jargon and polarized debate to get you the news and ideas that matter. Good schools are at the heart of our democracy and economy, and we're about good schools for all kids.
We hope you'll learn and maybe teach us something. Enjoy the show.
There should be an excellent school in every community.
Welcome to Good Schools for All. My name is Scott Lewis, and I'm here with my friend Laura Kohn. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Scott.
How are you?
I'm doing really well.
So that last voice, of course, on the intro is Shirley Weber. She's got more going on at the state level, pushing for more accountability on how these funds for poorer schools are being spent. Should be interesting to watch.
She's having at it. She took a run at it last session, didn't get too far, but she's got a lot of support from some education advocacy groups, so I think they'll be going at it again.
All right, I have a story.
Let's hear it.
It's a story of grit, Laura. It's
Yes.
a story of resilience. It's a story. So one of the things that my son and I have found that we like doing is fishing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we started, he wanted to go fishing, and I hadn't been fishing for a long time. It didn't go well. So 4 or 5 times, 6 times we go out, I didn't catch anything, and he started to doubt this whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This whole thing happens, right? So we would go out to shelter. So finally I started asking questions, watching YouTube videos. It's a real learning curve, man. Like it's not an obvious skill.
The fish are wily, aren't they?
They're wily, and you have to know how to tie knots and all kinds of stuff. I mean, you got to know it's your stuff. You can't just mess around.
Yeah.
And I was messing around. So I started to learn. I asked questions. I just went to the bait shop and just said, just tell me what to do. So finally I started now I catch fish. And so my son had seen me catch fish, but he hadn't actually done it yet, right?
Okay.
So we go out onto the pier at Shelter Island, and I get him set up. I've got him set up with 6 hooks, and he starts just snagging him. And each time it's just the fear and excitement in his face is incredible, right? I mean, he's just like, and he's reeling it in the wrong way, so the line is all over the place. I mean, it's a total mess. Finally, he catches a fish, and then he's sitting there with his pole, and I see it start to tug, and I'm like, Xavier, look, it's tugging again. And he goes, ah, and he starts getting really scared, and he starts reeling it in, and he literally can't pull. It's just this big.
Ooh.
And we look over, it's getting tangled with my line. It's just, there's something going on. And I look over, and this girl who was excited about, like the whole pier, by the way, is cheering for us because of how excited he gets. And this girl comes over and she goes, oh my God, there's 5 fish. There were 5 fish
Oh my God.
on his line, and he was trying to pull it up. And you should have seen his face as he's pulling it up. He's like, oh. He's just like so excited. He's pulling. And finally I have to help him because there's 5 fish on this line. I mean, he had 6 hooks, so it was like this one of these bait things. And he's just terrified and just so excited. I can't bring home just how intense his face was. Finally, we get him all over. It's all tangled. Everything's totally tangled up, and we start letting him go. Can't keep all these fish. And this is it. He's like, that's it. I've hit the pinnacle of fishing. But we went home. But the moral is, just keep trying. You just got to keep trying. And how do you teach kids to keep trying?
Yeah, that is such a key. Like, keep trying, get better, not just keep doing the same thing over and over again, but like get smarter about it, ask other people for advice, teach yourself, learn from what, take data from your prior failures and incorporate that. And yeah, I honestly think sports are really great, and music. Sports and music are two really great places that kids learn those lessons. But educators are really trying to figure out how to incorporate it into regular classroom day too.
Just like great. Well, we have a great show. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking. We wanted to bring unions and union representatives and even a superintendent who works with unions to come in and talk about the future of unions.
Yeah, one of my favorites of our prior episodes was the conversation that we had with the president of the Poway Teachers Union. We hadn't really touched the issue much since then, so I'm really glad we put together this panel, and the conversation is rich. Yeah,
so it's a particularly important time for unions. Locally, the San Diego Education Association, the teachers union that works for the San Diego Unified School District, the largest school district in the region, they do not have a contract. They're working on a contract negotiation. It's getting a little bit interesting. There's flyers going around the school campsite or campuses. There's all kinds of movement. There's nothing too serious yet, but I've heard rumblings about how it could get more serious, and they've got to figure that out. And nationally, there is a huge Supreme Court decision coming. I'm not sure how soon. I think there's still some steps before it, but basically, the Mark Janis, a worker in Illinois, sued the state and because of union dues he has to pay, or at least fees he has to pay to be a part of a union that he doesn't necessarily support. And even though the union bargains on his behalf, and now that's gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has what looks like a potential majority to throw out the requirement that that people who aren't members of unions but are part of a collective bargaining union at the state level don't have to pay, right? So they basically would be relieved of that required fee. Now, they could still voluntarily, of course, fund the teachers union, but that would have a major impact on politics. Teachers unions are big-time supporters of mostly Democratic candidates in places like California and in San Diego. And if that changes, that would be significant.
Yeah, it's one of these major areas where California is out of sync with the national politics. And this is a bellwether decision for the Supreme Court. California will undoubtedly keep in place all the ways that we protect and support labor and unions, but when a constitutional decision is made, it will trump. I hate that.
It's all right. So the discussion, but also I wanted to talk to, there's so much about union discussions in education that becomes so toxic as far as people's feelings about unions, but also about unions' feelings about them and how tense those discussions get. But when you boil it all off about the things we're talking about teacher placement, about teachers' evaluations, about teacher pay, all of those things are things that we should be able to have sober discussions about as representatives of the public or the unions or the education system. And so I wanted to start that and just see what we could get about what the role of unions are, maybe explain some of that, but then also talk about some of these issues and that case. And so we brought on David Miyashiro. He's the superintendent at Cajon Valley, and his union rep, the leader of the Cajon Valley Education Association, Chris Prokop, and then San Diego Education Association, the teachers union for the San Diego Unified School District. The leader, President Lindsay Birmingham, came in, and it was wonderful to talk to her. And then a rank and file member, an activist, and a leader for his own school site of San Diego Unified School District and the Education Association, Matthew Schneck, he came in. And so got a good discussion. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, the false narrative is that unions are about adults, and that that the adversarialness comes from them being about adults and the districts being about kids' interests, and that's completely untrue. I mean, teachers go into the profession because they love kids and want to spend a lot of time with kids. Some of them maybe lose that spark or that passion along the way, but there's a lot of room for common ground and a lot of room for constructive conversation, and a lot of that came out in the conversation we had with this panel.
Well, even if you believe that they are those things, like they're not going away. So maybe we should figure out ways to find this common ground, or also just to talk about the frustrations that people have and see what is real, what is something that we can talk about, and what is just off limit. I asked them a couple times, like, okay, where does that cross into where we can't talk about it, or we're being unconstructive or something? So I thought it was a good discussion. It's not going to be the first, I hope. I hope we keep this up, and let us know what you think.
Good Schools for All is also made possible in part by Thrive Public Schools. Thrive Public Schools are charter public schools serving students in elementary, middle, and high school throughout San Diego. Thrive was named one of the top 75 schools in the nation and is celebrated by the state legislature and local officials for innovation and excellence in education. Thrive engages students through cutting-edge technology, hands-on projects, and small group teaching. Thrive students are college-prepared, career-inspired, and community-minded. Visit thriveps.org to schedule a tour and get engaged.
Okay, we have a very special situation, a square table of sorts in the Great Voice of San Diego podcast studio. And I am joined here with, of course, my co-host, Laura Kohn. But we're also joined by a group of people who are going to talk to us about the future and the current status of educator unions in San Diego and across the country. So first up on this roundtable, I have Matthew Schneck. He is a member of the San Diego Education Association. He's an educator at East Village High. He's also the site representative for the union and an active person in the union. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
And Lindsay Birmingham, she is the president of the San Diego Education Association, the teachers union for the San Diego Unified School District. And she joins us. She's a new mother. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Chris Prokop, he is the Kohn Valley Education Association president, and he joins us. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure to be here.
And David Miyashiro, he is the superintendent of the Kohn Valley Education or School District, and he's been here before and kind of one of the people that helped us think about this show idea, and I appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
I think you'll provide a good opportunity for us to see labor issues from the management side as well, too. Mm-hmm. So, all right, let's have a good discussion. I wanted to just start the effort with a kind of explanatory discussion, like help us understand what teachers unions do and how the bargaining process works. And maybe I could start with you, Chris, about
Sure.
Kohn Valley. So you guys just settled a new contract with the administration at Kohn Valley.
Correct.
So tell us how that works, what kinds of things you talk about, and how the deal came out.
Well, as the sole bargaining representative for the certificated staff in the Kohn Valley School District, we are mandated by law to represent the interests of the certificated employees. So we typically start that process by going out and listening to our members to see what they're interested in, the issues. It's so much more than just salary and benefits, and so much of, especially our younger members or millennials coming into the profession, are really interested in working conditions, social justice issues that are impacting their students, and how we can work with the district to meet those needs. So we survey, get a list of priorities, and we start talking with the district. And it's a series of meetings as we identified goals and needs, and we negotiate back and forth. And we settled just about a little over a month ago, mm-hmm. and we actually settled a 2-year contract.
Mm-hmm. Is that normal, 2 years?
No, it's not. It's a lot. It takes a lot of variables in. When we settle, we go and talk to our members about why we settled for this reason. Mm-hmm. And currently a lot has to do with the state budget and resources that we believe are coming in. And so It's not unlike farmers looking at a tornado coming and saying we need to get the crops in fast and put them in storage. So,
David, help me understand from a superintendent's point of view, what issues are on the table and what are off? What is set by state law, and what can you do to talk about school quality and school performance in these negotiations?
It's interesting. The state provides guidelines and there are policies and ed codes, but at the local level, we have a lot of control. For example, class size, the state says that 20 to 1 when class size first came in, unless otherwise negotiated by the union in the district. So the teachers union contract trumps the state policy in a lot of cases. So a lot of things do come to local control. And that's why I think that local priorities and conversations that we have, the better the relationships that we have with both the governing board of a district, the association, and all the different moving parts within the district office is important.
So how long did the negotiations take for you all to come to this agreement?
it varies, and it can go from 3 to 4 sessions to places like Oceanside where they're over 500 days without a contract and have protracted. So it's really unique to the culture and the relationship that's between the association and the district. It's unique everywhere.
And you said that 2 years was not typical. What would be a typical union contract in California?
I'm going to say 1 year, and Lindsay's going to tell me otherwise. We do get to talk to lots of presidents throughout the state, so we have some perspective. Typically 1 year, but occasionally, depending on the circumstances and the variables with budgeting, financing, what value the district gets, and having a longer contract, what value there is to the association. There's something, sometimes we pilot new programs. We have a modified Monday, not to get into the weeds too much, but so that we can collaborate and our certificated staff can talk to each other about providing programs that are beneficial to kids. We're piloting that. District has an interest in maintaining that as well. So it's different everywhere.
Honestly, that's amazing to me that the typical contract is 1 year, recognizing how much effort it takes for both of you to come to agreement. So yeah, I'm interested, Lindsay, in your perspective on length of contract.
So I would say for us, the typical contract is actually 2 or 3 years, because as you said, the amount of time and energy that goes into not only bargaining the contract, but the input process that Chris talked about, going out to our sites, getting input from our members, getting input from the community, from our parents as to what they want to see in their schools. We typically aim to do a 2 or 3 year contract because that then gives us, once you've bargained that contract, a period of what we call, I guess you could say, labor management peace, where it gives you the opportunity to then work on other projects because bargaining takes a lot of time and energy. We've been bargaining right now for 7 months. We bargain roughly 2 to 3 times a month, but in between then, you're also having meetings with your stakeholders. You're having meetings with the district trying to do other things. And so in SDEA and in San Diego Unified, we've typically tried to aim for the 2 or 3 year contract. And that's currently what's on the table for us right now, is either a 2 year agreement or a 3 year agreement. And what we end up getting to depends on our current reality and where we think the district budget is, where the state budget is, and what we think is going to be the best agreement for our members and our students in San Diego.
So one of the things that I saw recently too, is at my own child's school and got a flyer, and it talked about a walkout, but it wasn't a walkout during school hours. It was just a kind of just an initial little shot maybe of just like, hey, this is what we could do. There's some tensions or there's some ideas. It feels, I talked to some friends who are teachers and they say there's some more tense discussions going on about potential, more hostile negotiations. Are we getting to a point where your union is in a tough situation with the district?
So I wouldn't say hostile negotiations.
Okay.
We're still at the table. We're still negotiating. But our district is currently in a budget deficit, is currently in a place where we don't have the level of money coming in to sustain the programs that our students and our schools need. And so we're in a period right now of figuring out For us, it's about budget priorities. Is the district spending the money they have in the best place to support the educators in supporting our students? And so November 8th was our pop-up picket. It wasn't a walkout. We don't want to impact instruction at this point in time. This was really showing solidarity. Educators, parents, students coming together to say, we support what SDEA is bargaining for. We support lower class sizes. We support supports for students. We support.
It was an acronym, LEARN, right?
LEARN.
Okay.
Yeah. It's lower class sizes, enrichment opportunities, attracting and retaining resources for students, and then no destabilizing cuts. That's what LEARN stands for. And that's really those goals, those pieces came from our members, came from the parents in the community on what they wanted to see in their school.
And I'm going to bring Matthew in a sec, but just one quick point. One of the pieces of tension between SDAA and the school district in the past has been the idea of the budget itself, whether it was real news or not, right? Whether the deficits that the district claimed were real, whether the finances were truly as bad. And so when you just said that there was a deficit, you acknowledge there is less money coming in than maybe the budget spending rate is. And so it's a matter of priorities. You're saying that there could be still cuts that could avoid layoffs, but could also support the kind of recruitment and salaries that you hope to see?
So we've always disagreed at what the level of the deficit is.
Right.
I think nobody's going to say that there's not financial situations in our district. It's to what level that's at.
Okay.
And when you are in a budget situation where you don't have huge influxes of money, it comes back to priorities.
Mm-hmm.
It comes back to prioritizing supports for students, prioritizing supports for our schools versus central office positions or new programs or consultants or things like that. So when there is a budget situation, it's not about whether or not you have the money. It's about how you're going to spend it.
Right. And one last thing before I turn to Matthew. So at what point do you hope to finish these latest rounds of negotiations?
We always want to finish as fast as possible because, as I said, once you can get that contract bargained, you can direct your attention to really building programs and working together to sustain those programs and best support our students, our educators, and right now, as Chris was talking about, some of those social justice issues, supporting our communities and our parents. And that's really, I would say, the best part of my job is when we can really go out there, work with our schools, work with the communities, and build those programs versus having to sit at the bargaining table back and forth. So I'm hopefully in the next few months. We're 7 months in now, but we'll see where it goes.
All right, Matthew, let me ask you. So you're one of those teachers that probably gets surveyed about what your priorities or your worries, your concerns are, your things that you'd like to see in the contract negotiations. But you've also been outspoken. Part of the reason I wanted to bring you on is you've been outspoken about the district needing to do more to recognize true vulnerabilities and perhaps being open and honest about those. And so when you look at what your priorities are as just a rank and file person in this district, what do you see and what do you hope that the union pushes for, and what could it do better?
I think one of the strongest things that SDA has done is get a class size cap of 36 students in the secondary level. I'm very fortunate where I'm at, where our class sizes are not quite that big at East Village High School. But to me, that's something that currently, based on what the school district has proposed, to cut. Is that correct, Lindsay, to say? To weaken the class size protection. So we have currently 36 is the cap. You can't put more than 36 students in a classroom. But the district's current proposal is to weaken that.
So how do you, as a rank and file teacher, keep tabs on what's going on in the bargain? I know you're not at the table and they can't sort of violate the sanctity of the negotiating table. So how do you stay connected to it?
So SDA is really good about sending emails out pretty weekly and definitely after bargaining sessions to kind of tell us where the district is at, what tentative agreements have been made, as well as what proposals the district is making and what proposals SDA is making. So it's probably the best way for members to stay informed about the bargaining session. I read them all the time because I want to know where the district is, or if we're moving closer to negotiation or to finalizing our contract or not.
How about parents? How do parents' perspectives come to the negotiating table? I'm interested, Cajon Valley, in how you felt like that worked in your most recent bargain.
That's a good question. Our board members, our parents in the district, I think they are very well informed, and by word of mouth, we talk. But that's not something that I think that the parent community is deeply knowledgeable about. To be honest with you, I would think that.
I agree with David. We always look at bargaining with either an external or an internal message, and typically we talk to parent groups to find out if they're happy, how do they feel about unique. We have a large Chaldean population in East County. Are our newcomer kids getting their needs met? And we do that, make a lot of contacts through the local control accountability plan process where all the stakeholders are there. But when we get down to the bargaining process, it's really a discussion between the association and the district. We would say, we listen to our community groups, but not necessarily so to the point where we don't have parents that sit in at bargaining. I'm not sure how that would
Can I jump back in?
Sure.
So I think that, to our credit, the last several years we've had very amicable negotiations and really good communication both with the unit and the board. And if that weren't the case, I think maybe our parent community would be very well informed, because maybe if the district wasn't doing right by the teachers, then the teachers would need to show the parents that the district was undervaluing them. And so I'd say that our parents haven't been quite informed, but because they haven't needed to be, perhaps.
So part of what I would want to follow up, I'm curious, this follows up with this point, is you were on the podcast not too long ago, and you talked about how you have a special relationship with the union. You've been able to pursue innovations along school performance and teacher performance, and innovations along personalized learning, and you've been able to do that because of the partnership. So what does that mean? Like, what are you? Do you feel like they're more easy to work with, or you're just better friends? How's this work?
Well, in 5 different districts I've worked now, the Teachers Association leadership have been some of the most innovative and best teachers in the school district. And that's absolutely the case in Cajon Valley. So one, I think negative assumptions could hurt the process. So if a district leadership assumes that teachers don't want to give their very best work or don't care about quality in the classroom, then the behaviors of the district and leadership are going to be to micromanage and to not trust and to not include. If the positive assumptions are that districts like ours assumes that teachers came into the profession to make a difference, that they work really hard, that they care deeply about their craft and improvement, then the way that we treat and respond is going to be inclusive and to trust them and to involve them in decision making. And I think that culture that we have has enabled us to move forward quickly. The other thing I would say is leadership matters. So Chris Prokop, without Chris, I don't know that we could have done the things we've done over the last 4 years so quickly or at all. So to say unions are good or bad, that's a wrong statement. The union is as good as its president, as its executive board, just as a district is as strong as its superintendent or its governing board. Leadership makes a huge difference.
I mean, it seems so obvious to me that a constructive relationship between management and union is going to result in better education for kids, and yet in most cases it's not as productive as it could be, or is not as productive, for example, as we're hearing about in Cajon Valley, and as I believe it is in San Diego as well. So what is the differentiator? Do you think the biggest differentiator between those productive relationships versus more adversarial ones is the union leadership or the point of view of the superintendent, or what other things might or do tend to get in the way of having that kind of relationship?
Yes. All of that. It's in any large bureaucracy, you have culture, you have past history, you have climate, you have all of that impacts, but ultimately I think it came down to when David was hired and we first met, we both realized that we wanted the same thing. The teachers, counselors, psychologists, and speech and language pathologists and nurses that we represent all want a quality program, and they want it to be innovative and creative and reflective of their goals and their thoughts. And from the beginning, David Miyashiro wanted to know what we thought. And when you start like that and you have a beginning, we can work together. Do we agree about everything? No, of course not. But he asks, and that permeates down to assistant superintendents, to program directors, to coordinators, people who are running the programs that impact our kids. And to the point now, in this far into David's tenure, that our employer cares about their teachers in discipline, in medical situations that impact our members, into even discipline that happens not very often with the quality of instructors that we have. But when it does, there's a care and concern that comes forward everywhere from district administration. It's very unique. I've been doing this I've been an educator for over 30 years, and it creates a climate that we can do our best work for kids.
Okay, so there's a lot of big concepts there, but what about specifics? Like, what were you able to achieve because of this relationship, specifically in how kids are educated or how teachers are placed or perform, that sort of thing?
Well, specifically, when I started, we had a technology desert.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a school had a computer lab with Windows 98. So a kid might touch a computer once every couple weeks. In the first year, we were able to establish a program where every child had a computer for their learning, which meant huge shifts in pedagogy and teaching and learning new technologies. That was massive, but that was just the beginning, because that led the way to different types of philosophy and classroom management and programs that you're able to offer. When every kid has a screen, it's not a static textbook. There are other things that they can do and access in computer science, in TED Talks, and some of the things that we've gone forward with in big initiatives that, they're tangible.
What you're talking about is flexibility, right? I mean, at the heart of a lot of these discussions is flexibility, that there's maybe an idea of how education could be better, or there's even flexibility in how teachers are placed. So, Lindsay, I want to ask you, obviously one of the first things that comes up when people express frustration about teachers' union and blame them for maybe some schools that aren't doing well and stuff like that, they point at that. They say flexibility in being able to hire and fire and place teachers, and flexibility in introducing new technologies and new styles, that stops with an organization like yours. What would you say when somebody brings that up?
I would say our union is all about innovation.
Mm-hmm.
It really truly is about putting together the supports and programs that our students and educators need to be successful. Yes, flexibility can be helpful, but at the same time, flexibility can also harm students and harm schools if it's not used in a way that is fair and is equitable. That flexibility has given us the opportunity to bring innovative programs into the district, programs that are led by the union.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about kind of innovation and how they work together. We're reaching an agreement right now on a parent-teacher home visit project, which is bringing something new that was started as a pilot by the union, funded by the California Teachers Association and NEA, which is all about building relationships between schools and communities. That came from the union. That didn't come from the district. That was an idea from us of having teachers going out into the community, visiting the homes of their students, building those relationships, learning about what parents and students need. And so unions are all about innovation. It's not about blocking anything, but it's about innovating, and it's about really supporting a public education system that's going to give our students, no matter their zip code, no matter where they live, where they come from, giving them the education and supports that they need.
So when I think of, like you talked about zip codes, so one thing that comes up in discussions here and there, the issue of like La Jolla, the La Jolla cluster in the San Diego Unified School District, they have a special arrangement where they're able to pick more liberally from the qualified teachers for who gets to teach in the La Jolla cluster. Not true?
Not true.
Okay, explain that to me. Because
the La Jolla cluster follows the same contract as everywhere else. I would actually say some of our struggling schools are the ones that actually have a more liberal process for picking. Where schools that were in struggling areas, previously API 1 through 3 schools, we don't have API anymore, but it's still kind of using those schools, actually get a full list of people of who they're going to hire for their areas, and other schools get a list based on seniority with only a select few. La Jolla did ask to do that, and that was declined because we feel that that wasn't fair, that wasn't equitable, and it wouldn't have been what was best for students. So
I just was misinformed. That's just was that an old policy, or was just one that just
it was
didn't work?
Something they attempted to do, and it was denied by both the district and the union.
Okay.
It was something that we did not support. They asked for what's called a contract waiver, and SDEA denied that waiver, which means it's denied by the district as well.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So on the issue of you guys mentioned before the program about this E3 program from the county. And something that comes up often, and we were talking with the leader of the union in Poway about some very proactive teacher evaluation practices that they were trying to work on and that they had been doing for a long time to sort of counsel those who are struggling out if they needed to be, but also coach those who might be struggling but might have some potential as educators. So I think obviously this is another fault line that a lot of people who talk about education come down on. It's often just a binary, but is it so binary? And what is this program as you described it, E3?
So it's the Educator Effectiveness and Evaluation Program, and it's actually something that both San Diego Unified and Cajon Valley are working on. And it's a collaborative program bringing together educators, union leadership, and district management to build a professional growth system. So there's, as you said, teacher evaluation is one of those things that's always out there. People either love it, they hate it, it's good, it's bad. But this is really about providing meaningful feedback to teachers. We want that feedback. We want to grow as professionals. And we often find that the professional development we're getting, the support we're getting, isn't actually what we need. And that people at different parts of their career actually need different kinds of support. And through this E3 program, we're able to, from the ground up, develop a system that meets the needs of both the district, that fits within the regulations of Ed Code, but also meets the needs of our educators, and providing them the feedback. And one of the things that we're really excited about is the mentoring and coaching aspect of educators actually being able to be supported by somebody that's doing their same job. I had the opportunity of being part of an amazing kindergarten team when I was at my school. I received so much support and grew so much as an educator because of the educators I was working alongside. And so creating a system that provides those kinds of supports to our educators, no matter what classroom they're in, what school they're in, is something we're really excited about, and is something that we've been able to start the process of working on with the district. And we'll hopefully have a new system within the next year or two that we'll be able to bargain into our contract. It's going to be piloted this next school year. And really move from there.
So Matthew, I see you nodding your head. What are the teachers' interests in having a better professional growth system?
So I think there's a long-running joke in San Diego Unified that our current STEL objectives don't really, it's us creating these goals and then putting a bunch of paperwork together to prove that you've met those goals, and your principal kind of comes in, observes you once, and that's kind of it. And it's not, teachers want to grow, and it's exciting to kind of hear that, there's something coming down the pipeline where we're going to be able to get mentored or improve our craft.
So where does it cross the line, though, of where an evaluation goes from being helpful, being constructive, to being something that you won't have, that you can't, that is destructive, or that you feel like won't add to the value? I'm going to start with Lindsay, and then I'm going to hear what the Cajon Valley guys have.
So I think, and I talked about it before when we were talking about schools, but a lot of the work we do, I think, comes down to a process that is fair and equitable, a process that provides coaching and support, that provides that to everyone, no matter where they're at. But in a situation where somebody might be struggling, there's different tiers then of coaching and support that they need to figure out, can this teacher be supported to improve? Or does this teacher need to be doing something different? And so we have different systems in place. We have a peer assistance and review program. We have remediation plans. There's all sorts of different progressive steps to go through in order to ensure that every educator, you start at a place where every educator is provided good, real professional development, coaching, and support. And that works for 95% of the educators I would say we have in our district. And there's a handful of people that need more. And so having our administration provide them the additional support they need, whether it's through a PAR program, whether it's through professional development, whatever it may be, and then going through that process to figure out, can this person be coached? Can they be supported? And can we give them what they need? Or do we need to go through a different process, whether it's their probationary and it's non-reelection, whether it's going through the dismissal or suspension process, whatever it may be. But there's processes in place. And so it's developing a system that supports everybody, but also allows for districts, because that is, you talked about before, what is the district's role or responsibility? They do need to make sure that their educators are doing what they need and meeting expectations.
And I think at the heart of that, as any manager would say, like, you have to have that space where there's a point where you just need to tell that person that that's not going to be the place for them, that this job is not the place for them. And if these conditions aren't met. And so I think what a lot of people worry about, that's not available in the public education system. And in particular, that comes up with the probationary period, right? There's this 2-year period before they move into more permanent status. And I'll turn to you real quick. Well, Chris, answer that. So is 2 years enough to have the flexibility to talk about that with them?
You have to answer that question in the context of a growing teacher shortage, where research shows that 46% of teachers are gone in the first 5 years of their profession because they find out how difficult and challenging a job it is. So when you take that into context and you have our youngsters coming into our profession, over half of them in tens of thousands of dollars of debt that they went into just so they can work with kids. Probationary period of 2 years, to me, I don't know if you know the history of that, but I think it's a good compromise. Teachers associations, contrary to popular myth, do not protect bad educators. We protect, and Lindsay touched on this, due process rights. One place where our association and our district leadership are really working together was in the area of what constitutes a bad evaluation. We started talking 5-6 years ago, and we started using the same language so that when a member would contact us, said, I've received needs improvement, we would get all of the documentation, look at it and say, oh, there's holes here, or we would say, you know what? They did their job. You have a documentation, you have frequent observations. Here's where you were directed to do this. Is this all true? So when we're speaking the same language, we understand each other, and it makes it a lot easier. And we're here to provide the best education possible for our kids, and we've been able to do that.
Do you agree with that, David? Is 2 years enough to have the flexibility to deal with teachers that may be struggling?
I would like to have more time because it's not really 2 years because we have to decide by March. So it's really 18 months. Mm-hmm. Reflecting on the teacher evaluation process as both a teacher and a school principal, it was one of the things I hated most about the job. So as a teacher, one, because that 1 day or 2 days a year that the principal came to observe me didn't highlight the things that I felt were best about me as a teacher. The things that were on that checklist were not the things that I think that valued most or mattered most. And I got good evaluations, but I didn't even feel that the principal really got to know me as a teacher through the process. And then as a principal, I hated it, one, because it's an enormous time consumer, the process that the districts I worked for had. And the same thing, too, it was meaningless in terms of the feedback that the teacher actually got through this tool and the way that I could communicate with them. So when you look at strengths and teachers that bring multiple strengths to the table, you might have a fourth grade team where one teacher's really strong in bringing arts into the curriculum. One teacher's really strong in planning mathematical practices, and different teachers bring different strengths. The teacher evaluation process isolates teachers and gives them feedback individually and doesn't foster collaboration or utilizing strengths to provide equity and access to all the teacher's strengths through a curricular process. So I think that this process with feedback and coaching that SDEA and Kohn Valley are involved with some other districts are partnering as well, will bring that back to more trusting teachers that they do want to make a difference and giving them more control over the feedback and coaching process.
Yeah, it sounds like you're headed in a positive direction. So you mentioned to us that you're working with the San Diego County Office of Education on this E3 process. So you're learning together, I guess, about alternative approaches to that. Were you able to integrate some of the E3 philosophy and framework into the contract that you just concluded? And Lindsay, are you aiming for that in the negotiations you're in right now?
So we haven't yet, but we have agreed that when that is ready, we will have a contract reopener to bargain it into the contract. So we don't want to bargain it in now because we haven't piloted it yet. We want to make sure it's going to work. You want to make sure it's not something that you just create and you haven't even tried it out. So once it goes through the pilot process, we have already reached agreement that will be a contract reopener, that when that new system is ready, it will be bargained into our contract through the bargaining process.
Exactly in the same place as SDA and San Diego Unified. And we've even gone so far as to start getting trained on best practices from taking pilots and upscaling them to district-wide, because there's challenges in that. So just because you have a good program that you work collaboratively to develop doesn't mean it's going to be implemented correctly. So we're even looking at that, and that's a lot greatly due to David's leadership in looking at innovative and creative practices and how best to make them work in a large school district.
Matthew, I want to follow up on a point you made about this. You were talking about how removed it felt in some ways. Do you feel like the current evaluation system and how you're observed is at all beneficial? And also, do you feel like, I mean, you probably see peers out there that shouldn't be in these roles or that should get a lot of help or something. Is this system in place to do that?
I mean, it's not within anyone's best interest to have bad teachers in the classroom, but at the same time, it is. I don't know if I've actually seen, at my own side, I've not seen a bad teacher. I have seen teachers that may need more support, and no, I don't think the current evaluation process that we have in San Diego Unified, the STOL, where we have to create STOL objectives, is effective in helping me grow, or any other teacher for that matter. It's really easy to put on a dog and pony show if that's something that you want to do, if you know your principal is going to come in for one day to go watch what you're going to do. So that's why looking at evaluation models that focus on growth and mentoring, and I would assume, depending on where it goes, having the principal come in multiple times, having multiple people watch you would make more sense.
Is there a place for student or parent evaluations?
Currently, no.
No, I mean, not there obviously isn't now, but should there be?
I question student evaluation only because would it become a popularity contest? Would it be, this teacher's really hard or really rigorous, and I don't like the fact that I didn't get an A, so I'm going to go and rate them poorly.
I would say that there's a place for student and parent feedback. Whether it's evaluation, I think that's something different. As Matt said, there is some concerns with it being a popularity contest, and just because you didn't like a grade, you're then rating somebody wrong. But we do have educators within our district that have created their own parent and student feedback surveys that are anonymous, that they use personally. It's not something that's sent to their administrator, sent to their district. But we have seen successful uses of parent and student feedback where you do, as an educator, use that feedback to help you grow. And that could be considered part of the professional growth system. It depends on just how it's used and in which manner it's used.
So we're talking about some of the most tense issues in education. Really, these things obviously blow up in some ways, and yet we're all fine, right? We're all here having this conversation. At what point do you think it turns to something where it gets that toxicity, where what causes this kind of discussion about evaluations, about placement, and about tenure or permanency? At what point does that cross to something unhelpful, Chris?
Well, I'm going to tell you that in my experience, and I'll be interested to hear what Lindsay has to say as well, it's when someone who has a political agenda is trying to advance a certain attitude, or let's say somebody who's trying to weaken public education to the growth of for-profit charter schools. So we see what's happening up in LA Unified, and they're not talking about kids. They're trying to weaken associations. They're trying to grab a part of $1 trillion industry, and that's, to me, where politics come into public education. It gets toxic. Also, when ignorance and people get their backs up, it becomes an ego issue. I've seen that in associations as well as districts. I mean, where there's a lose-lose, I'm not going to lose situation. So
let me just follow that up real quick. So what tips could you give somebody who wants to have these discussions about evaluations and about teacher performance and all that without that being the line that's been crossed, without being accused of being part of that political destruction?
Well, in Cajon Valley, we started all discussions with, I think we both want the same thing. It's
a matter of respect.
Yeah, it was, because this is our employer. They're going to greatly impact our ability to deliver services to children. They control our working conditions, the curriculum that we teach, and how they approached us was, hey, we want your input. We welcome those discussions with community members, political figures. We have a very innovative, creative program out in East County. But if you look at our political representation, we're fairly to the right. And we're able to do that because we have a wonderful, educated board that we all work to help get elected. And the community generally wants the best for kids. So we've been able to keep all of that out of what's happening in our public schools because we've been so successful.
Yeah. So, David first.
I would say I'd go back to negative assumptions in leadership. No Child Left Behind policy really focused on sticks, not even carrots, just sticks. Punish teachers, shame them, shame school leaders, and then race to the top, infuse carrots to the sticks. Here's money if you do this, and if you tie teacher evaluation to this, and those both failed miserably. But at the leadership level, if the leadership focuses on culture and respect and trust, then how these tools of evaluation become a different thing. And they could be the same tool, but if you have a leader that's a micromanager or that assumes bad things about employees, then that tool becomes a really heavy stick that can be used for evil. So I'd go back to leadership and positive assumptions is what we need to start with.
Yeah. So leadership and trust are really key, and not bringing politics to the table is another key. But when resources are scarce, that tends to make the relationship more tense. You were alluding to that earlier, Lindsay. To say a little bit more about how the differing perspectives of the union and management around the health of the budget get worked through.
So I think Chris hit on a big piece is people have to believe that you're coming to the table with positive intentions, we are all here in order to support students. We are all here in order to give students what they need to be successful. And sometimes what we believe students need differs. Sometimes the district administration believes one thing, we believe another, and it's really about coming together, having those hard conversations. Yes, sometimes you have to duke it out. Sometimes you go out and you do pickets if you believe that that's what's in the best interest. And ultimately, you have to believe that everybody is in this with the right intentions, and that ultimately we will get the schools our students and our communities deserve. One of the things we need to do that is to improve public education funding. That's one of the things that we're talking about at the bargaining table. Is the reason why we're having a difficult time is because we don't actually have the money we need to give our students everything they need. And so we need to work together as union leadership, as district leadership in Sacramento, in Washington, D.C., and improve public education funding with things such as 20 by 2020, which is $20,000 per ADA by the year 2020. It's a big number, but you need to reach high in order to get what your kids need.
ADA being average daily attendance,
Yes.
and that's the sort of
Per
money
pupil funding
that each school gets. Okay, so let's talk about funding for a second. One thing that a school board member, Richard Barrera, mentioned after a recent speech he gave was that he was considering putting on the ballot or helping to get onto the ballot some kind of property tax or real estate transfer fee or something that would raise money for the San Diego Unified School District. I remember him and I talking way back in 2010. They put a parcel tax on. It got more than 50% of the vote, but it needed 2/3. This time there's a thinking that some sort of private initiative might only need a simple majority. Is that something you're working on?
Not currently. We are really in bargaining right now, 100%. That's another reason why we need to get bargaining done so that we can focus on those other things. But depending on how it's written and depending on where that money would be going, that would absolutely be something our union would support. If we can ensure that that money is transparent, accountable, and going towards what we believe are the priorities our schools and students need.
That is kind of an awkward chronology, though, right? If you guys negotiate a raise that might cause a budget shortfall and then put the tax increase on, that might be an argument that the tax increase is to fund the raise, right?
So I don't necessarily see it that way. If we end up bargaining a raise, that's because we bargained that because that's what our schools and our students and our educators needed. One of the reasons why we bargain raises isn't to put money in the pockets of educators. It's to ensure that we can actually have educators filling classrooms and supporting our students. It's a recruitment tool. If we don't have those raises, our educators are going to leave and go to Cajon Valley. They're going to leave and go to somewhere else, and then they're not going to be there. And so yes, sometimes those things are tied together, but it really comes back to priorities and budget priorities. The money you have, the pot that you have, where does that money need to go? And if it's through parcel taxes, if it's through Prop 13 reform, if it's through sales tax initiatives, if it's through lottery money, all of that money, we need to figure out what's the best way to spend it in order to support our students and in order to support a public education system that our communities deserve.
Every time we talk about school funding, somebody emails and says, what about the lottery money? All right, let me ask you one other point on this. Let's say somebody sat down and said, I'm interested in supporting this with you, maybe some sort of transfer tax, some sort of revenue increase, but I would want to see something of good faith about teacher evaluation reform also as package of this. Let's work this out. Let's solve this problem as you've described. Are those two conversations something you can have at the same time, or must they be separate?
You can have the conversation. I can't guarantee that we're going to get to a common place where we agree, but we're, as Chris said, always open and willing to have those dialogues and conversations. And again, we're trying to move away from evaluation being seen as something bad and it more being growth and development. And so if it was something about growth and development, absolutely. Now, if you said it's going to be tied to the state standardized test scores, for me personally, I would say that's a non-starter.
Okay.
Because one test score of one student on one day does not tell you the success of a student or the success of an educator. Test scores, I would say, would be a non-starter. When it comes to evaluation professional growth, I wouldn't say that's a non-starter, but we need to be looking at student growth in a much bigger picture and not just based on a standardized test score.
And with all due respect, I haven't seen any research that ties poor teacher performance to, I almost deny the premise that it's because we have poor evaluation language that schools are failing.
I don't hold that premise. I do think there's obviously some schools doing better than others.
Right.
we need to figure out what that is. But let me ask.
Poverty?
It usually comes to resources. Poverty. That usually it comes to resources.
I mean, there is a direct correlation between student test scores.
Do those kids have a home to go to every night? Do they have food in their stomach when they go to bed and when they come to school in the morning? Do they have books at home? Does that school have the resources they need? As you said, schools in La Jolla, schools in Scripps Ranch have foundations that sometimes give their students more than other schools. That's not a teacher evaluation, a teacher effectiveness thing. It comes down to resources, whether it be resources at home or resources within the district.
Come to Cajon Valley, inner city El Cajon, not exactly high socioeconomic area. We have some of our most innovative, creative, productive schools. David can really, I mean, it's because we provide a great program for those kids. It's resources.
What's the question, Laura?
Well, yeah, so poverty matters, but there are also schools in Cajon Valley. Chula Vista is an exemplar on this that are serving low-income kids, and they're really hitting it out of the park. So poverty is not the only factor. There's more going on than that.
So to go back to Scott's point about if we were to come together and look at, okay, we'll give school districts the support if you tie it to evaluation, I would agree with a table that tying it to test scores is a non-starter. I think we need to look at different metrics, because when we have 6 million unemployed in America and 7 million unfilled high-wage, high-demand jobs, that's an education problem. And when the microscope of Cajon Valley, which is, competes with Vista for disengaged youth, ages 16 to 24, not in school and not employed, those are some issues. So I think that if we change the metrics to happy kids engaged in healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment, and we had some type of measurement to gauge whether that's happening, and we follow those kids on a LinkedIn profile after they leave the system to see, are they actually happy still? Are they in healthy relationships? Are they gainfully employed? And you never hear the term college and career ready, standardized test scores. It's all about the outcomes. What happens to kids after they leave our system? Because I would argue that the K-12 system altogether is designed for the age of industrialism. And we need to repivot and look at alternative measures. And I think if we do that, then you'll start to see massive growth.
All right. Well, we're running a little late on time. Thank you so much. But I do want to ask about one thing that's going on, and this is at the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. There's a case called Janus versus the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which at the heart of it, of course, is this idea of a man who feels like he shouldn't have to pay teacher or union dues, even though he's part of a collective bargaining unit. And the law in Illinois says that you have to pay a fee because of the benefits you get from being part of that unit. That case at the Supreme Court looks like there's a potential majority on the Supreme Court that may make it impossible to collect union dues from people who are not actually members of the union, which has been interpreted as a major potential threat to teachers' unions and to their influence in the political system. Lindsay or Chris, Lindsay first, what's your thinking on that case? What kinds of impacts would it have should it be decided contrary to the unions?
So I'll say the goal of that case is to weaken unions. The goal of that case is not about whether it's fair to pay union dues or not. It's about weakening unions. And I'll say for SDEA, for CTA, we're not going to let that stop us from being able to advocate for our students and advocate for public education. Could it make it harder? Absolutely, because there might now be freeloaders that are going to reap the benefits of having a contract that protects their hours, their working conditions, and whatnot. But at the same time, our educators know how important it is for their voice to be heard when it comes to advocating for students, when it comes to things being done in our school system that's best for students and it's best for public education. So it's going to make our job a little bit harder, but it's not going to stop us from being tireless advocates for not only our students, but for public education in general and for the schools that our communities deserve.
Absolutely. I think these people came at us with over the last 12 years, 3 ballot initiatives that tried to accomplish the same thing. The people of the state of California are pretty smart, and they value education. They saw through these attempts. Now through the courts, they're going to probably achieve what they think is a success. I always like to tell our members that when we had the highest percentage of American workers in unions was in the 70s prior to agency fee. So it's just going to require us to do our job a little differently, but we always will need to have a voice in what happens in our schools. We'll always need to represent our members' working conditions, our kids' learning conditions. And so this is just a momentary setback for us. It'll just change the way we do things. I do like to point out that the state of California filed an amicus brief when the Friedrichs case, which was similar to this, because the state of California, the Cajon Valley Union School District, the San Diego Unified School District have a vested interest in having a stable relationship with their employee groups. You know, prior to collective bargaining in 1975, it was the Wild West. 920 teachers in my district, you'd have 920 separate contracts with different working conditions applied differently. I don't mean to go on and on here, but we have pay equity in public education in the state of California. There is no glass ceiling for women, and that was achieved through collective bargaining. So we're not about to give up on all of that, and we're just going to change the way we do business and keep advocating for kids.
Quick point. So in Cajon Valley, and I think it's the case in lots of places, when the union leadership is strong and there's good relationships between the bargaining units and the district, then the association is not only good for teachers, it's good for the children they serve. It's a way that we ensure equity and access to these programs to all kids, because the union as an organization, they organize around the contract, but they also organize around implementation and equity for kids. And if we lose that, I'm concerned about the quality and the reach of the curriculum and the innovations for all kids.
All right. David Miyashiro, Superintendent at Cajon Valley School District, Chris Prokop from the Cajon Valley Education Association, Lindsay Birmingham from San Diego Education Association, and Matthew Schneck. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. I think it was a productive conversation. Maybe we can have a part two. So thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.